What would you do if everything you believed about your identity was built on a lie, and the truth forced you to confront the very foundation of your life? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? Naomi Tanaka's life was a meticulously crafted tapestry of success and order, each thread woven with care and precision as she thrived as a corporate litigation attorney in the bustling heart of Los Angeles. Yet, that carefully controlled environment shattered in an instant when a late-night phone call sent her racing to the hospital. Panic tightened her chest as she navigated the sterile hallways, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the hushed whispers of nurses weaving a shroud of anxiety around her. Emiko, her mother, lay unconscious, and as the doctor delivered the news of her fall, Naomi felt the ground beneath her shift, plunging her into a whirlpool of fear and uncertainty. Just days later, when her mother stirred from her medicated haze, Naomi sat vigil at her bedside, ready to grasp any thread of reassurance. Yet what came out of Emiko's lips shocked Naomi to her core. David? David, her mother mumbled, the name echoing like a chime that struck a discordant note in Naomi's heart. Each mention tugged at her like a ghost, unsettling and unfamiliar. Her instincts kicked in, and Naomi leaned forward, urgency bubbling in her veins. What do you mean, Mom? Who's David? But Emiko drifted in and out of lucidity, trapped in a fog of memories and regrets, offering no concrete answers. Days turned into restless nights as Naomi's mind spiraled through the gaps of her mother's silence, grappling with the fear that something was fundamentally amiss in her life. The image of her father, a man she held dear in her heart, waned, replaced by questions that gnawed at her. Had all her life been a carefully spun lie? A nagging itch compelled her to sift through her mother's possessions, desperate for clarity. It was in a tattered box of old letters, hidden under a stack of years, that she stumbled upon the key to her mother's secrets correspondence signed by a man named David Nakamura. The cool paper brushed against her fingertips, a stark contrast to the sudden heat pooling in her stomach as realization dawned. Shock and curiosity collided within her. Who was this man, and what had her mother kept from her? With each stroke of the inked letters, Naomi was drawn deeper into a labyrinthine quest for the truth, one that would upend her understanding of her own identity. Driven by a hunger for answers, she began to map out a plan, consuming every detail and leading her to San Francisco, where the man behind the letters resided. Little did she know that this journey would engulf her in a tempest of emotions and unearth the very foundation upon which she had built her life. As she restructured her reality, an unyielding resolve coursed through her veins. This David would soon be confronted, and the swirling chaos of hidden truths would threaten to unmake everything she thought she knew. As days turned into an endless cycle of questioning and research, Naomi poured herself into unearthing the truth about her biological father. Sitting in her sleek modern apartment amidst piles of documents and images of the mysterious David Nakamura, she felt a mix of dread and determination pulsing through her veins. Her sharp mind, accustomed to dissecting legal jargon and corporate strategies, thrived in the challenge ahead, filling her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. After relentless digging, she confirmed that David was indeed a well-respected businessman in San Francisco, known for his philanthropic endeavors and a reputation that had remained untarnished, much like the polished veneer of his luxurious lifestyle. With her heart racing, she booked a ticket to the city, envisioning the confrontation that awaited her, all while trying to approach this new chapter with the same pragmatism she applied to her cases in the courtroom. The sun dipped below the skyline as she touched down, a golden hue casting an ethereal glow over the iconic bridge, symbolizing the duality of her journey, hope intertwined with uncertainty. The charity event she had tracked him to was buzzing with energy, the air rich with the scent of gourmet hors d'oeuvres and the soft, inviting laughter of mingling guests. Naomi felt her pulse quicken, a whirlwind of anticipation mixing with anxiety as she stepped onto the plush carpet. Dressed in a fitted navy dress that highlighted her assertiveness, she scanned the crowd, her gaze finally locking onto David. He was speaking with an older gentleman, his charm and charisma evident in the way his laughter echoed through the space. This was not the man she had imagined based on her mother's distant memories and unsaid words. He was larger than life, radiating an allure that made her heart beat erratically. Summoning her courage, Naomi approached him, each step laden with both purpose and trepidation. As she introduced herself, a cocktail of emotions surged within her. Resentment, hope, and a desperate need for validation collided. "I need to talk to you about Emiko Tanaka," she stated, her voice steady but her insides roiling. At the mention of her mother's name, she watched David's posture stiffen, confusion clouding his features. He looked at her, assessing yet bewildered, his brow furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry, but I don't know who that is," he replied, his voice firm yet tinged with the slightest hint of concern, as though he genuinely wished she were mistaken. Shocked and frustrated by his denial, Naomi felt the ground shift beneath her. A moment that could rewrite her entire identity suddenly felt infinitely distant, like a mirage unreachable in the oppressive heat of her revelation. Undeterred, she pressed harder, glancing around to ensure the world around them faded into oblivion for the clarity of their moment together. The event's laughter and clinking glasses were mere background noise. The real drama unfolded in this microcosm of confrontation. "You don't understand," she leveled at him, her hands trembling slightly as she fought to maintain composure. "She's been keeping secrets. My entire life is built on them." David's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing as she spoke, the flicker of understanding igniting a spark of deep-seated turmoil within him. "Whatever happened with Emiko, that's all in the past," he insisted, the finality in his voice leaving a bitter taste in her mouth, as if every hope she harbored was slowly being extinguished. Walking away from the event, Naomi's mind was a storm of emotions colliding, a fierce battle between craving acceptance and the instinctual urge to retreat into isolation. Back home, she faced her mother, claws of determination pushing her toward confrontation, but she found Emiko, tired and vulnerable, shoulders hunched as the weight of her secrets bore down. "Why didn't you tell me?" Naomi spat, the hurt spilling over the dam she had constructed to protect her heart. "I had to protect you," Emiko responded, her voice cracking under the strain of the admitted lie, acknowledging the crack in their relationship that had only widened. It was then that the dam ruptured completely, unveiling the torrent of unspoken truths. With great reluctance, Emiko confessed that she had been lying about Naomi's father her entire life. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, leaving Naomi grappling with a reality that shattered the very foundation on which her identity had been built. The world around her spun as she grappled with the implications of who David truly was and what that meant for her journey of understanding herself. The revelation crashed over Naomi like a wave, sweeping away the very essence of her identity, leaving her gasping for breath on the shores of an unforgiving reality. David Nakamura, a name that had once merely hinted at a mystery, now bore the staggering weight of her lineage, her biological father, yet a stranger who had lived blissfully unaware of his daughter's existence. As Emiko sat upright in her hospital bed, her face a mixture of guilt and resignation, she whispered the words that transformed Naomi's world into a kaleidoscope of confusion and betrayal. Emiko admitted that she had hidden the truth, that the man who raised Naomi, whom she had adored and revered, was not her real father at all. George Tanaka had loved her fiercely, but the sacrifices made to shield her from the implications of a scandal had woven a web of lies so intricate that Naomi felt suffocated by its betrayal. Each memory she had cherished flashed before her eyes, now tainted with the knowledge that her very foundation was constructed on deceptions. "He loved you as his own," Emiko had said softly, her eyes brimmed with tears, the truth slicing through Naomi's heart like a knife. The affection she had felt for George now mingled with an aching anger towards her mother, who had crafted this elaborate facade while keeping her daughter in the dark. The world spun around her as she struggled to grasp this painful new narrative. Fighting back tears, Naomi resolved she could not let the truth remain buried. She would confront David once more, but this time, she would be armed with irrefutable proof of her claims. She searched her mother's belongings with a fervor fueled by desperation, sifting through old letters and photographs that whispered secrets of a life she had never known. One letter, in particular, caught her attention, a delicate piece of stationery scrawled with an elegant handwriting that declared unwavering love, signed boldly with the name David. As she held it, the ink felt as heavy as the promises that had once sealed her identity. Determination ignited within her. She would face him, she would unmask the truth that had haunted her mother all these years, and she would lay bare the tangled threads of their lives. The thought of being dismissed again clenched her stomach with anxiety, yet Naomi steeled herself with the conviction that she deserved answers that might bridge the chasm her heart now knew existed between her and the man whose DNA coursed through her veins. Gritting her teeth, she prepared to move forward, leaving behind a life filled with illusions and stepping into the uncertain waters of truth. The sun dipped below the horizon as Naomi searched for strength within, her heart a mix of fear and resolve, knowing that confronting David Nakamura would either bring her closer to understanding or plunge her deeper into despair. David Nakamura sat in his spacious office, the skyline of San Francisco sprawling through the expansive windows, but the view felt dull and distant as he processed the revelation that had just shattered his carefully curated life. The weight of disbelief hung heavily in the air, thickening the atmosphere around him as he clutched the letter Naomi had brought, a fragile piece of paper carrying a lifetime of secrets. As the words echoed in his mind, he felt a storm of emotion swirl within him, guilt clawing at his insides. How could she have hidden this from me all these years? He muttered to himself, staring blankly at the city below. He was a man of integrity who cherished loyalty above all else, but this breach of trust transformed everything he had once believed about his past. Home felt like a distant memory now, a place filled with laughter shared with his wife, Linda, and their children, but under the surface, a dark tide of uncertainty crested. When he finally returned home that evening, his demeanor was a mixture of apprehension and sorrow, and the moment he stepped through the door, he sensed that his family's stability was teetering on a precarious edge, awaiting the wrong word to send it crumbling. Linda Nakamura noticed his troubled expression immediately. The elegance that usually accompanied her was marred by anxiety as she stepped forward, concern etched on her perfectly composed face. She had been meticulously arranging the flowers in the living room when David entered, catching a whiff of the floral scent that momentarily masked the tension choking their home. "What happened?" she inquired, her voice steady yet laced with worry, as if trying to anchor him to the present. David took a deep breath, knowing the words would splinter the fragile facade they had constructed together. "I have a daughter, Linda. An adult daughter I never knew about," he confessed, his voice trembling under the weight of reality. The silence that followed felt unbearable. It was as if the air had thickened around them, suffocating any chance of immediate reassurance. Linda's eyes widened, shock and disbelief coursing through her veins. Anger simmered under her composed exterior, the kind of anger that threatened to boil over if uncontained. "You can't be serious. What about us? What about our family?" she demanded, incredulity spilling from her lips, hurt mingled with fear. She was fiercely protective of the life they had built together, seeing Naomi's unexpected arrival as a potential storm capable of tearing apart their stability. Meanwhile, David's eldest son, Eric, was preparing for a long day at the hospital where he practiced medicine as a surgeon. His life revolved around precision and control, traits he had inherited from his father. However, even as he scrubbed his hands at the surgical station, preparing himself for another demanding shift, a restless energy flared within him, gnawing at his thoughts. His mind swirled with disquiet when he overheard whispers at the family dinner table regarding Naomi. "Why wasn't I informed about this sooner?" He seethed, feelings of betrayal crystallizing into a fierce fire of resentment toward a sister he had never known and did not want. To him, she was not a sister but an intruder, a potential disruptor of the life he had fought to stabilize. His protective instincts flared as he began to plot how he would safeguard his position in a family that felt increasingly threatened by Naomi's very existence. Across the living room, their daughter Melissa sat quietly, her art supplies strewn around her as she struggled to focus on her projects. The drama unfolding around her felt like a brush dipped in darkness across her canvas, muffling her thoughts and diluting her creativity. She sat, torn between loyalty toward her father and mother and an overwhelming curiosity about the mysterious woman who has suddenly entered their lives. Her heart ached at the thought of having a sister, someone with whom she could share her thoughts, her dreams, her art, yet the dominion of familial loyalty shackled her spirit. "What if she needs us?" Melissa thought to herself, grappling with the jarring contrast of emotions brushing against each other like dissonant colors on her palette. Nights turned into turmoil as the fears of losing her family began to cloud her judgment, but each time she painted, she wondered about the woman at the center of their storm, feeling drawn to the sense of connection she had never tasted before. As the days unfolded and tension festered like an untreated wound within the Nakamura family, David found himself torn between the newly discovered piece of his heart and the life he had built with Linda and their children. His reflections brought home vivid memories of joy interspersed with the growing anguish of newfound guilt. At work, the bustling nature of the corporate world faded into the background, overshadowed by the chaos that had breached his personal life, and in the solitude of his thoughts, he felt drowning under the waves of his revelations. He often caught himself glancing at the family photos lining the walls of his office, capturing smiles that now seemed laced with shadows of lies. David craved to reach out to Naomi. An aching desire grew inside him to know her, to embrace her as a daughter of his own, yet the chasm of his current life pulled him back into reservations tangled with guilt, for he was now a man divided. Naomi's world had taken a sharp turn, one that had left her reeling with confusion and heartbreak. The stark reality of her situation loomed over her like a heavy cloud, and despite the allure of her family's affections, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Nakamuras had built their lives on a facade. Each time she recalled the look on Eric's face, the unyielding hostility he directed toward her, her heart sank deeper into uncertainty. It gnawed at her as she sat in her cramped Los Angeles apartment, her once reliable sense of identity now in disarray. The phone buzzed with another message from Ryan Sato, offering words of encouragement. He'd become a constant presence in her life, a beacon amidst the storm that raged within her. As an investigative journalist, he shared her passion for uncovering the truth, but more importantly, he offered a kind of understanding that Naomi desperately needed. He said that he admired her strength, urging her not to let the rejection from a family that didn't want her define who she was. His words floated within her mind, leaving ripples of warmth and a budding sense of hope. It was during one of their evening meetings, surrounded by piles of documents and old newspaper clippings, that the gravity of her family's history began to unravel. Ryan leaned over the table, his fingers brushing the edge of a yellowed article about a local scandal from years ago that inexplicably mentioned Emiko's name alongside someone named David. His face was serious as he pointed at the text. He said that the past might hold secrets more intricate than either of them had imagined, urging her to consider the choices made by the adults in her life. Naomi could feel her heartbeat quicken. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of the tangled web that had ensnared her family for decades. They delved deeper into the mystery, skimming through Emiko's past, piecing together fragments of stories long hidden. As they bonded over each discovery, the air between them thickened with something unspoken, a magnetic pull that Naomi both embraced and feared. Late one evening, the glow of the laptop illuminated their faces as they sifted through more old letters and documents. The cramped space buzzed with tension and unrecognized longing. Ryan said that her determination reminded him of the stories he used to hear about star-crossed lovers, and Naomi couldn't help but smile, shaking her head as she brushed a stray hair behind her ear. Their laughter echoed softly in the night, a comforting balm amidst the chaos abound outside in the sprawling city. But with each shared glance, Naomi felt a flutter in her chest, an electric feeling that both thrilled and terrified her. The moments of levity became punctuated with heavy breaths and silent acknowledgments as if they were both grappling with something larger than themselves. Amidst the layers of familial entanglements and the steady emergence of resentment from David's family, Naomi realized that forging a bond with Ryan felt like an escape from her tumultuous reality. They often found themselves exploring the city together, little quaint cafes where warm aromas embraced them like old friends, parks where laughter filled the air, and quiet corners where they could exchange fragments of each other's lives, peeling back the layers of their souls. During their late-night strolls under the shimmering stars, Ryan often spoke of his dreams, his aspirations to tell stories that would change the world. He urged her to pursue her journey, saying that everyone deserves a chance to rewrite their narrative. For the first time, Naomi felt a flicker of excitement. Perhaps she could carve her own path amidst the ruins of her familial upheaval. As the soft twilight deepened into night, Naomi couldn't help but feel a shift within her, a resistance emerging against the loss she had experienced, pushing her to explore these newfound feelings blossoming for Ryan. The path toward healing seemed less daunting with him by her side. Each stolen moment carried an undeniable chemistry, igniting a warmth within her that she had thought extinguished. It was in this fragile bond that Naomi began to see her own worth, realizing that her identity was not solely tied to her origins but was also forged in the choices she made moving forward. But even as their connection grew, the shadows of David's family loomed large, with each revelation drawing Naomi closer to a precipice, one that threatened to engulf her in a wave of emotional tumult. The closer she drew to Ryan, the more she felt the weight of her own family's expectations, and the nagging question of whether she even wanted to be part of a life that so adamantly resisted her presence. Torn between the ties of blood and the warmth of a burgeoning relationship, Naomi stood at a crossroads, her heart pulled in two directions: the desire to accept her place among the Nakamuras and the urgency to embrace the new life she was building with Ryan, whose laughter and insights had become an essential part of her rebuilding process. It was a delicate balance, one that required her to summon the strength to navigate her path through the minefield of her existence as she sought clarity in the midst of chaos. In the dim glow of a San Francisco cafe, filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the quiet hum of subdued conversations, David Nakamura sat at a small table, anxiously tapping his fingers against the polished surface. The rain pattered gently against the window pane, mirroring the storm of emotion swirling within him. As he awaited Naomi's arrival, a sense of trepidation clung to him, tugging at the corners of his heart. This was a man used to making tough decisions in the boardroom, yet today, sitting in this intimate setting, he felt vulnerable. When Naomi finally walked in, the world seemed to freeze for a moment. She looked so much like him, her dark hair framing her face in soft waves, her expressive eyes flickering with uncertainty and hope. David rose to meet her, his heart pounding as they exchanged a hesitant but purposeful greeting. As they took their seats, he could see the weight of the world in her gaze, and it propelled him to speak from the heart, as she had somehow become a part of him in a way he never anticipated. David began by articulating his disbelief, admitting that he had spent sleepless nights replaying the past, dissecting the choices made by himself and those around him. He looked at her intently, and with a heavy breath, he said that had he known she existed, everything would have unfolded differently. The way he articulated his regrets resonated with Naomi, who was battling with her own feelings of abandonment. This revelation stirred a mixture of anger and yearning within her. The father she had longed for was now tangible yet out of reach. Yet, the conversation turned when David hesitated, grappling with the fear of public acknowledgement that such a connection could bring turmoil into his already complicated life. His love for the family he had built was palpable, yet at that moment, he felt torn, as if the very air around him became thick with unspoken truths. While they navigated the labyrinth of their shared history, Linda Nakamura crossed the threshold of their home, a place once filled with laughter and warmth now overshadowed by deceit and confusion. The vibrating phone in her pocket buzzed incessantly, but it was the sight of her husband's troubled expression that gripped her heart with unease. David had always been her anchor, but now he seemed adrift, his mind occupied by another woman, their child, one who did not fit into the neatly crafted narrative of family life. When Linda learned of the private meeting between David and Naomi, a storm brewed. Confronting him, she couldn't hide the contempt lacing her voice as she demanded, "David, you have to cut ties with her. We have built our life on foundations of stability, and now?" Her voice trailed off, heavy with fear and vulnerability, aware that the fragile framework of their marriage was beginning to fracture. The tension electrified the atmosphere, and David felt the walls closing in on him, each uttered word deepening the crack in their relationship as anger and fear commingled. They clashed like thunder in the night, revealing hard truths that had long been buried: fears of inadequacy, desires left unexpressed, regrets of paths not taken. Their marriage, crafted on love and mutual aspirations, now found itself crumbling beneath the weight of secrets and unfulfilled expectations. As Linda stood there, her expression hardening, David grappled with the realization that embracing Naomi meant risking everything he had achieved, yet ignoring her was no longer an option. The dilemma tore at him, and he felt the tears welling up in Naomi's eyes as she silently listened to their confrontation, feeling like an intruder in a family she never chose to disrupt. This meeting, meant to be a bridge connecting lost connections, had suddenly transformed into a flashpoint of chaos, unraveling the threads that bound David's world together. In that dimly lit cafe, under the bittersweet taste of hope and despair, all three found themselves at a crossroads, each facing the undeniable truth that their lives would never be the same again. As the rain continued to fall outside, the storm within their hearts mirrored the tempest surrounding them, igniting the indecision that plagued them all, and marking a pivotal moment destined to redefine their futures. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting an amber hue across the city, Eric Nakamura's resentment boiled quietly beneath the surface, a low burning anger that had been stoked by Naomi's very presence. He felt her invasive arrival like a dark shadow creeping into his family's idyllic life. Discovering that Ryan Sato, his childhood friend, had been assisting her only fueled the fire. Eric confronted Ryan in a secluded corner of a bustling cafe, where the air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the chatter of blissfully unaware patrons. Eric loomed over him, eyes narrowing with intensity, and said that he found it hard to believe Ryan was supporting someone like Naomi, a woman who threatened to unravel their family fabric. Ryan looked up, unflinching but with an edge of unease, the bitterness of Eric's hostility cutting through the warmth of the cafe, making him realize that this was no longer just a story but something deeply personal. Feeling the tension thicken, he said that he couldn't stand by and watch someone struggle alone when he believed she deserved the truth about her past. The argument escalated, voices rising above the ambient noise as they drew the attention of nearby tables. In that moment of confrontation, Ryan found himself wrestling with an undeniable truth: his concern for Naomi had evolved into something deeper. Eric's accusations landed heavily, and as Ryan bristled against them, he felt the fierce surge of protectiveness rise within him. He didn't just want to report on Naomi's life. He cared for her. His heart raced as he realized the complexity of his emotions, and he said that their conflict wasn't just about family lines. It was about letting Naomi face her truth. Meanwhile, as Eric's hostility hung in the air, Naomi sat in her own turmoil, isolated back in her apartment, contemplating the fight that had consumed her life since unearthing the truth. Her mind drifted to the heart-stopping moment when she stood before David Nakamura, a man whose existence redefined everything she thought she knew. Was fighting for a place in this man's life worth the emotional turmoil she was experiencing? The truth felt heavy, like a lead weight anchoring her to uncertainty. As she stared out of her window, watching the twilight wash over the city, her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Ryan, simply checking in, and yet, the warmth in those few words breathed life back into her weary soul. But even as she felt a flicker of hope, a new wave of fear washed over her at the prospect of opening her heart to yet another complication. Just when she thought she was beginning to understand her place, the world around her twisted once again. Meanwhile, as the atmosphere crackled with tension between Eric and Ryan, the longer the confrontation dragged on, the more Eric's scorn seeped into Ryan's thoughts, mingling with everything he felt for Naomi. Eric said, with a voice dripping with indignation, that she would never truly belong to their family, regardless of what feelings Ryan tried to justify. Ryan felt the weight of Eric's words. They cut deeper than he anticipated. This wasn't just a matter of familial loyalty, it was about Naomi's right to know, to understand what had been denied to her for too long. Amidst the chaos, Naomi received a call from the hospital. Her mother Emiko had suffered a relapse, and the urgency of the moment stoked the embers of her already racing heart. There was no time left to dwell on her own worries. She rushed to the hospital, her mind a whirlwind of uncertainty. Stepping into the sterile, fluorescent-lit room, she found Emiko fragile against the stark white sheets, her mother's usually strong presence now diminished. The memories of childhood warmth washed over Naomi, contrasting sharply with the fear gripping her heart. The gentle beep of the machines echoed, underscoring the vulnerability of the woman she once viewed as indomitable. The moment felt surreal as Emiko managed a weak smile upon seeing Naomi, a flicker of recognition shining through the haze of confusion. Naomi held her mother's hand tightly, whispering comfort, but her heart ached, torn between the love for the woman who had raised her and the complexities of their shared secret that had come to light. Standing by Emiko's side, she questioned her path, feeling the weight of two worlds colliding. The fallout from David's revelation was an emotional tug-of-war, and the thought of following through with a life that intertwined with his family felt daunting amidst her mother's fragile state. In that moment of vulnerability, Emiko suddenly stirred, her eyes unfocused as she mumbled something barely audible. Naomi leaned in closer, straining to catch her mother's words, wondering if more truths would surface in this moment of fragility. Emiko's labored breath sounded like a desperate plea, weaving their shared history into the tapestry of a life that was now irrevocably altered. Caught between her mother's failing health and the tumultuous reality of a family that might never accept her, Naomi was forced to confront her own identity. Could she face the remnants of a past that had been concealed? And as Ryan's text buzzed in her pocket, a reminder of the one person who had reached out amidst the chaos, she felt the shift of resolve brewing within her. In the deepest confines of her heart, she realized the battle for her place had only just begun. Whether it was alongside David's family or for the future she could carve out for herself, the choice was now hers to make. David stood in the center of his elegant living room, the opulent decor surrounding him feeling more like a gilded cage than a sanctuary. The tension was palpable, filling the air with an unsettling energy. His heart raced as he prepared to confront the undeniable truth he had been avoiding for far too long. When he finally spoke, his voice broke the silence like a gust of wind shattering glass. He declared that he wanted to meet Naomi, a decision that felt both liberating and terrifying. Linda's response was thunderous, her eyes flashing with anger and betrayal as she demanded to know what he thought he was doing. She had spent years building their life together, sacrificing so much for the stability of their family. The thought of Naomi, this unexpected daughter, surfacing now threatened every carefully laid plan. David extended his hand toward Linda in a plea for understanding, but his words landed heavy between them. He said that he couldn't ignore Naomi any longer. Each moment that followed unfolded like a tangled thread, drawing them closer to the unraveling of their marriage as Linda's composure began to fray. Meanwhile, as Naomi navigated through her swirling emotions, she could feel the weight of the aftermath of her mere existence in their lives. Standing at the doorway of her apartment, the faint glow of the city lights seeped in through the curtains, illuminating her conflicted heart. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, a stark reminder of the chaos she had inadvertently unleashed. The thought that her father was finally willing to embrace this new relationship brought a flutter of hope, yet the turmoil and pain within the Nakamura household overshadowed any joy she might have felt. The distant sound of sirens echoed outside, a symphony of urgency that paralleled her own internal chaos. And as she contemplated her next steps, an unexpected knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. It was Ryan, standing there with an expression that radiated both concern and admiration. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, sensing her turmoil. He said that she didn't have to feel guilty for wanting to know her father. His voice was steady, a calming presence amidst her storm. As they settled on the worn couch, Ryan spoke softly, sharing his thoughts about family and identity. He said that choosing the path that felt right for her was essential, and she needed to embrace who she was becoming. His sincerity wrapped around her like a warm blanket, providing comfort in the midst of uncertainty. With each word, Naomi felt a connection grounding her in ways she never anticipated. The flickering candlelight cast playful shadows on the walls, mirroring the flickering emotions in her heart. As the conversation deepened, they shared moments of vulnerability and fear. He spoke about the struggle between loyalty to family and the desire for individual truth. Their hands brushed and lingered, igniting a warmth that was both exhilarating and terrifying. In that moment, Naomi realized that Ryan understood her in ways that others could not. She felt seen, and in a world full of confusion, it was a light guiding her forward. But as the evening wore on, heavier thoughts weighed on her. The implications of her choice to walk away from David and the Nakamura family loomed large. David wanted to know her, yet the ripples of her presence threatened to drown them all. She looked at Ryan, concern etched on his face, and felt the tension tighten within her chest. She wondered if stepping into David's world would lead to healing or more chaos. Her heart told her one thing, but the reality was painfully clear. She would have to navigate this with grace and resolve. She said that she needed time to think and decide what was truly best for her, and Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. They spoke late into the night, their connection deepening amid laughter and shared dreams, reminding her that there was life beyond her lineage. As she finally bid him goodnight and closed the door, the echoes of their words lingered in her mind. In this moment of clarity, Naomi perceived her path. She would carve out her identity on her own terms. The dawn of a new beginning awaited her, and she felt a sense of empowerment rising within, alongside the fires of uncertainty that ignited the world outside. She would follow her own heart, regardless of the familial ties that had tried to define her. Naomi stood by the window of her small apartment in Los Angeles, the city stretching out beneath her like an endless canvas of possibility tainted by a bittersweet hue. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden rays that seemed to dance on the waves of her tumultuous emotions, evoking memories of her tumultuous journey over the past few months. David's face lingered in the recesses of her mind, a mix of pain and confusion. She felt a weight resting heavily on her shoulders, a lingering echo of everything she had lost and gained. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, David sat at the dinner table with Linda, both of them silently chewing through their meals, the tension stark and palpable. The warmth they once shared had been replaced by an awkward chill, conversations reduced to short, clipped phrases. David's thoughts were disjointed, unraveling with every bite of food he forced down, each thought circling back to Naomi and the existence of a daughter he never knew. He thought to himself that confronting Naomi had been the first step in acknowledging a truth he had long evaded, but he now grappled with the cost of that admission. Linda met his gaze across the table, her eyes reflecting not just disappointment but a fierce protectiveness for the family they had built together, voicing her concerns openly while masking the fear that swallowed her whole. David sighed heavily, lifting his fork with an air of resignation, knowing deep within that the threads connecting them were fraying quickly. As Naomi wandered through her apartment, she couldn't shake off the thought of Ryan's supportive presence, a beacon during a time of absolute chaos. His allure lay not only in his laughter, which rang bright like a bell, but in the warmth of compassion tucked quietly behind his cynical facade. He had sought her out with a determination that was infectious, his words weaving through her defenses like silk. She remembered their conversations, the easy banter that flowed between them, and the sweet sense of escapism that came from simply laughing together over coffee. When Ryan found her, it had felt like a gentle storm breaking over a parched land, and now, standing at the precipice of uncertainty, he had quietly confessed that he wanted to be with her, unhindered by familial ties, and that sentiment echoed through her heart like thunder, gaining momentum. Naomi's heart stirred as she recalled Ryan's earnest gaze, the way he had leaned closer, ensuring that his words resonated deep within. "You deserve happiness, Naomi, with or without them," he had reassured her, and she felt the warmth of his presence radiate, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. That reminder had been crucial, particularly as she faced the fear of losing herself amidst the tangled web of familial expectations and societal judgments cascading around her. The city seemed to hold its breath as she felt the gravity of that truth settle in. Her identity was not confined to the origins laid out by blood but was a mosaic crafted by the decisions she chose to embrace. Naomi turned away from the window, her heart swelling with newfound resolve. There was beauty in fragmentation, she realized. The threads of her past and present intermixed, creating a complex tapestry that was entirely her own. She decided that the path ahead would not be dictated by the nagging doubts birthed from her family's reactions, nor dictated by the constraints of her biological ties. She needed to be the architect of her life, embracing the steps that aligned with her true self, even if it meant redefining success and love in ways others couldn't understand. Meanwhile, David could no longer ignore the churning emotions within him. He felt the stirrings of remorse and guilt mix with an acceptance of the transformation sweeping through his family, painfully aware that salvaging their unity would require acknowledging the fractures that had already developed. He had tried to hold on to the illusion that everything would return to normal, but he knew in his heart that genuine connections could only thrive on truth. As math and family dinners turned awkward, the truth began demanding a new conversation, one he was simultaneously yearning for and dreading. Acknowledging Naomi had compelled him to reassess the choices he had made, not just regarding her, but woven throughout the fabric of his family life. "I can't pretend to take control of what I never acknowledged," he confessed quietly to Linda, who looked at him, her expression a tumult of emotions that reflected years of shared life. As silence filled their home, both David and Naomi embarked on a pivotal journey filled with love and longing, awakening to the understanding that their identities would forever be shaped not only by the ties of blood but also by the choices they made as they moved forward. In that knowledge, both father and daughter discovered the strength to embrace their future, a future that might just illuminate the truth of who they were meant to be. Months later, a crisp autumn morning envelopes Los Angeles as Naomi Tanaka steps out into the sunlight, embodying a renewed spirit. The days of relentless questioning about her origins have transformed into a quiet acceptance, as she glances at the vibrant cityscape that has come to feel like home again. After countless conversations that brought her and Emiko closer, their relationship begins to unfurl anew like the cherry blossoms blooming every spring slowly, yet beautifully. She learns to appreciate the time spent with David and even the glimpses of warmth shared with Eric and Melissa, who cautiously begin to acknowledge her presence, recognizing the complex ties that bind them despite the rocky histories. The phone buzzes in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It's Ryan, with an invitation that makes her heart flutter, a dinner with him at their favorite rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. As she prepares for their evening, she feels an exhilarating thrill wash over her. It's not just a dinner, but a celebration of everything she has come to embrace about herself. Flashbacks of their late-night discussions, laughter, and the way he challenges her to see her worth unfold in her mind. They have woven a tapestry of moments, each thread vibrant and filled with the promise of something more. Underneath the soft glow of string lights and the gentle hum of the city below, Ryan looks at her with a warmth that ignites a surge of hope within her. "Naomi, there's something I've been meaning to ask you," he starts, his voice barely above a whisper, his gaze steady with intent, igniting an unspoken anticipation in the air. Just as he leans closer, ready to bridge a gap that might alter their journey together, an urgent phone call interrupts. It's Emiko. Her tone is tinged with urgency as she calls Naomi back home, revealing that a familiar face has returned, brimming with questions that could threaten the fragile harmony she has built. A familiar mix of dread and determination courses through Naomi, but this time she's no longer the timid girl searching for answers. She's a woman ready to wield the truth as both shield and sword. She glances at Ryan, who nods silently in understanding, a reminder that she's not alone in this storm. As she heads back, the world around her reverberates with possibilities, each step echoing the promise of new beginnings, hidden truths, and paths yet to be tread. The horizon stretches before her, not just a line but a myriad of choices unfurling, and each heartbeat pulses with life. Above all, Naomi knows that her story is far from over. It is merely the prelude to a grand narrative waiting to be shaped by her resolve, potential, and the love she's learned to embrace. As she walks into the uncertainty, the reader can feel the magnetic pull of uncharted adventures ahead, leaving them with breathless excitement and an unshakable desire to discover how far Naomi will go to find her place in a world that is just beginning to reveal itself to her. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.